I was seconds away from opening my late husband's cellar when a stranger's scream stopped me cold. "Don't open that door. Your daughter-in-law was here last night." What he told me next would unravel a secret so dark, it would destroy everything I thought I knew about my family. If you're watching this video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Now let's get to the story. The morning fog clung to the Sharpe property like a burial shroud. I stood at the cellar entrance, the old brass key cold and heavy in my palm, and told myself this was just another task. Just another item on the endless list of things widows must face when their husbands leave them behind. Clear out the workshop. Sort through the tools. Donate what can be donated, discard what cannot. Simple. Manageable. Bearable. 6 months had passed since Charles died. 6 months since the phone call that shattered my world, Clara's trembling voice on the other end. "Mom, it's Charles." His heart. "The ambulance is here," but the rest had dissolved into sirens and sobbing and the terrible, final silence of a hospital room where machines flatline and doctors speak in hushed, apologetic tones. I'd been in town that day, running errands. Buying groceries for the Sunday dinner we would never have. Clara had been home with Charles, helping him organize estate documents in his study. She was always so helpful. So devoted. So eager to ease our burdens. Heaven sent, I used to call her. The daughter I never had. Now, standing before this locked cellar, I felt the weight of her kindness differently. She had insisted on changing all the locks after the funeral. "For your safety, Mom," she'd said, squeezing my hand with those perfectly manicured fingers. "We can't be too careful. You're alone now. We need to protect you." At the time, I'd been grateful. Now, the memory made my stomach turn. The cellar key had been the last one replaced. Clara had supervised the locksmith herself, explaining that Charles's original key had been lost years ago. She'd handed me the new key just yesterday, wrapped in tissue paper like a gift, and said, "Whenever you're ready, Mom. No rush. Take your time grieving." But this morning, something had pulled me here. An instinct. A whisper in the back of my mind that sounded like Charles's voice. "Go now. See what's been hidden." I slid the key into the lock. That's when I heard it. "Don't open that door, ma'am, your daughter-in-law was here last night." The voice ripped through the fog like a gunshot. My hand froze mid-turn. My heart slammed against my ribs so violently I thought my chest might crack open. I spun around, the key still clutched in my fist, and saw him, a gaunt man in a stained maintenance vest, running toward me from the road with his arms waving frantically above his head. His face was bone white. His eyes, sunken, bloodshot, were wide with terror. Not the unfocused terror of madness, but the sharp, specific terror of someone who has witnessed something unspeakable and cannot unsee it. "She buried something down there," he gasped as he reached me, doubling over to catch his breath. Dirt streaked his hands. His fingernails were black crescents. "Please, don't touch it." I saw her. Midnight. She was carrying a box and a shovel. The words hit me like ice water. My lungs tightened. The cellar. Charles's workshop. Sealed shut since his death. Only Clara had the replacement key. The one she'd given me yesterday. "Who are you?" I whispered, though my voice sounded like it belonged to someone else, someone smaller, frilier, more frightened than I wanted to be. "Mason, ma'am. Road maintenance crew." He pointed a trembling hand toward the state highway visible beyond our fence line. "I work nights sometimes. Clearing debris. Checking drainage." His voice cracked. "Last night I was out there around 1 a.m. I saw movement near your property. Figured it was an animal at first, but then I saw the flashlight. And her. My throat was so tight the word barely escaped. "Your daughter-in-law. I recognized her from town. Mrs. Clara Sharpe." He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "She didn't know anyone was watching. She parked on the access road, walked across your back field with a box under one arm and a shovel over her shoulder. She went into that cellar. I heard metal scraping. Digging. She was down there for nearly an hour. The keys slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the concrete step. The metallic sound echoed in the cold morning air like a bell tolling for the dead. Everything suddenly felt wrong, horribly, sickeningly wrong. Charles had died 3 weeks after changing his will. Massive heart attack, Dr. Brennan had said, shaking his head with professional sympathy. Sudden cardiac arrest. Sometimes there's no warning, Mrs. Sharpe. Even in healthy men. But Charles was healthy. He walked 5 miles every morning before breakfast. He took his vitamins religiously. He'd never complained of chest pains, shortness of breath, or dizziness. He was 73 years old and stronger than men half his age. And the only person with him when he collapsed? Clara. Sweet, helpful, heaven-sent Clara, who'd moved into our lives 2 years ago when Daniel brought her home for Thanksgiving. She'd charmed us instantly, her warm laugh, her easy conversation, her genuine interest in our family stories. Within 6 months, she and Daniel were engaged. Within a year, married. She'd woven herself into the fabric of our family so seamlessly that I couldn't imagine life without her. Until now. Why are you telling me this? I asked Mason, my voice barely audible. He looked down at his scuffed work boots, his jaw working as though chewing over words too difficult to swallow. Your husband. Mr. Sharpe, he was kind to me. Years back, when I was doing construction work on your fence line, he'd bring me water in the summer. Coffee in the winter. Even sandwiches sometimes. His voice broke. He treated me like I was a person. Not just another piece of scenery. Tears burned my eyes. That was Charles. Always noticing the invisible people. Always extending kindness where others extended indifference. Mason met my gaze, and I saw the conflict there, the fear of seeming crazy, the desperation to be believed. Last night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what I'd seen. And then I had this dream. Mr. Sharpe was standing right where you are now, at this cellar door. He looked at me and said, "Watch over Jessica. She's in danger." I woke up shaking. I knew I had to come. My hand flew to my mouth. A sob caught in my throat. I know it sounds insane, Mason added quickly. But I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't. It doesn't sound insane, I whispered. It sounds exactly like something Charles would do. Even from beyond the grave, he was still trying to protect me. I pulled my cell phone from my cardigan pocket with trembling hands and dialed Sheriff Morrison. My voice sounded distant and mechanical as I explained the situation. Stranger, warning, possible tampering. Morrison knew our family. He'd been Charles's poker buddy for 20 years. He said he'd be there in 10 minutes. Mason refused to leave. I need to see this through, ma'am, he said quietly, shoving his hands deep into his pockets. I need to know I did the right thing. You did, I told him, though my whole body was shaking. You absolutely did. Sheriff Morrison arrived with Deputy Hayes. Both men wore expressions of professional skepticism that softened when they saw my face. Morrison had been at Charles's funeral. He'd held my hand during the burial and promised, "If you ever need anything, Jessica, you call." Now he was here, and I needed everything. Mason says Clara was in the cellar last night, I said without preamble. Digging. Burying something. Morrison exchanged a glance with Hayes. You want us to take a look? I nodded. The sheriff produced bolt cutters from his trunk. The lock was old and stubborn, and with a sharp crack, the chain fell away. The cellar door groaned on rusted hinges as Morrison pulled it open. A wave of stale air rolled out, carrying with it the smell of ash and something chemical, acrid and wrong. My stomach lurched. Morrison descended the stone steps first, flashlight cutting through the darkness. Hayes followed. I stayed at the threshold, Mason beside me, both of us holding our breath. Mrs. Sharpe, Morrison called up after a moment. His voice was tight. You're going to want to see this. I forced my legs to move. The steps were slick with moisture and age. At the bottom, Morrison's flashlight beam illuminated the far corner of the cellar, near the old coal furnace Charles had converted to storage decades ago. On the dirt floor lay a small metal box, half buried in freshly turned earth. Its edges were scorched black. The smell of burnt plastic and paper was overwhelming. Don't touch it, Morrison warned Hayes, pulling on latex gloves. He knelt and carefully pried open the lid. Inside, charred documents, curled and blackened at the edges. Melted plastic, maybe from a driver's license or credit card. And nestled in the ashes, untouched by flame, a single gold locket. Morrison lifted it with gloved fingers. Even in the dim light, I could see the engraving, C.S. Charles Sebastian Sharpe. May I? I whispered. Morrison placed it gently in my palm. The metal was still warm, as though it had recently been held. I opened the clasp with shaking hands. Inside was a photograph, small, old, faded, of Charles. But he wasn't alone. A woman I didn't recognize stood beside him, her hand resting on his shoulder. And in her arms, wrapped in a white blanket, was a baby. The world tilted. My knees buckled. Morrison caught my elbow, steadying me. Mrs. Sharpe? I don't know who she is, I breathed. I've never seen her before. But even as I said it, something tugged at the edges of my memory. The shape of her face. The curve of her smile. Something familiar. Something I should recognize. Morrison carefully gathered the contents of the box into an evidence bag. We'll need to process this. Run tests. But Mrs. Sharpe. He hesitated. If your daughter-in-law was trying to destroy evidence, we need to know why. I looked up at him, tears streaming down my face. Clara has the only key to this cellar. She replaced it herself after Charles died. The sheriff's expression hardened. Then we need to have a conversation with Clara. But I shook my head. No. Not yet. If we confront her now, she'll run. Or worse, she'll destroy whatever else she's hiding. I wiped my eyes, and as I did, something cold and sharp settled in my chest. Not grief. Not fear. Clarity. I need to know what she's done, I said quietly. I need to know why. And I need proof. Morrison studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. What do you want to do? I looked down at the locket in my hand, at the woman and the baby and my husband's face, younger and untroubled. I want to find out who this woman is, I said. And I want to know why Clara is so desperate to erase her. The evidence bag crinkled in Sheriff Morrison's hands as he sealed it, the sound too loud in the suffocating silence of the cellar. Through the plastic, I could still see the locket gleaming among the ashes, that damning photograph of Charles with a woman whose face I couldn't place but somehow recognized in the way you recognize a ghost. We'll run this through the lab, Morrison said, his voice carefully neutral. See what we can recover from the documents. But Mrs. Sharpe, I have to be honest with you. This looks like old personal effects. Maybe things your husband wanted disposed of after his death. Sometimes people make arrangements like that. Final wishes. I stared at him, disbelief flooding my veins. Charles would have told me. Morrison's expression softened with the kind of pity reserved for grieving widows who can't accept reality. People keep secrets, even from the ones they love. Especially from the ones they love. Not Charles, I said, but my voice wavered. Because wasn't that what every betrayed spouse said? My husband would never. Right up until the moment they discovered he absolutely would. Deputy Hayes emerged from the far corner of the cellar, brushing cobwebs from his uniform. Nothing else down here, Sheriff. Just old tools and storage boxes. Looks like this was the only thing buried recently. Morrison nodded and turned back to me. We'll document everything. Make a full report. But unless something criminal turns up in the analysis, there's not much more we can do. Your daughter-in-law had permission to be on the property, and burning old documents isn't illegal. She was here at midnight, I protested. Digging in my cellar without telling me. Which is odd, I'll grant you, Morrison acknowledged. But odd isn't criminal. Talk to her, Jessica. Ask her directly. There might be a perfectly reasonable explanation. A reasonable explanation for sneaking onto my property in the dead of night to bury evidence of Charles's secret past. My hands clenched into fists. But I forced myself to nod. Of course. You're right. I was lying. Morrison knew I was lying. But he was also a small-town sheriff who'd known our family for 2 decades, and confronting Jessica Sharpe, beloved community volunteer, devoted wife to our golden boy Daniel, would require more than ashes and speculation. As the sheriff and his deputy climbed the cellar stairs, Mason lingered behind. His face was drawn, worried. He'd been silent during the entire investigation, standing in the corner like a guilty man awaiting sentencing. "Ma'am," he said quietly once we were alone. "I know what I saw. That wasn't innocent." The way she moved, quick, furtive, constantly looking around. Like she was terrified of being caught. "I believe you," I whispered. His shoulders sagged with relief. "The sheriff thinks I'm crazy. The sheriff thinks everyone's crazy except other sheriffs." I managed a weak smile. "He's a good man, but he's cautious. He won't act without proof." "What will you do?" I looked down at my empty hands, still feeling the phantom weight of that locket. "I'm going to find the truth. Whatever it costs." Mason pulled a crumpled business card from his vest pocket and pressed it into my palm. "My cell number. If you need someone to watch the property at night. Or if you need a witness. Or just..." He trailed off, his face reddening. I owed Mr. Sharpe a debt. Let me help repay it. Tears pricked my eyes. "Thank you, Mason." He nodded once, then climbed the stairs and disappeared into the morning light. I stood alone in the cellar, surrounded by the ghosts of Charles's past. The workbench where he'd built Daniel's first bicycle. The shelves lined with paint cans and fertilizer and Christmas decorations stored in labeled boxes. Everything ordinary. Everything familiar. Everything a lie. My phone buzzed. A text from Clara. "Mom, heard the police were at the house. Are you okay? Coming over right now." My stomach twisted. Of course she'd heard. In a town this small, Morrison's cruiser parked in our driveway was as good as a billboard announcement. And of course she was coming over. Because that's what innocent, concerned daughters-in-law did. Or because she needed to know exactly what we'd found. I climbed the cellar stairs and closed the door behind me, my mind racing. By the time Clara's silver Mercedes pulled into the driveway 20 minutes later, I'd managed to compose myself. Barely. She burst from the car like a woman fleeing disaster, her perfect blonde hair slightly disheveled, her designer handbag swinging from her shoulder. "Mom. What happened? Are you hurt? Did someone break in?" The performance was flawless. Wide eyes. Trembling voice. Hands reaching for mine in genuine seeming concern. I pulled back slightly. "A maintenance worker saw someone on the property last night. We checked the cellar. Found some old items that had been buried." Clara's face flickered, just for a millisecond, with something that might have been panic. Then the mask returned. "Old items? What kind of items?" "A box. Burned papers. A locket." I watched her carefully. The sheriff took everything for analysis. "A locket?" Clara's hand flew to her throat in theatrical surprise. "How strange. Do you think it was valuable? Maybe someone was trying to steal it?" It was engraved with Charles's initials. The color drained from her face. Then, just as quickly, rushed back in a flood of pink. "Charles's? But I don't understand." Why would someone bury Charles's belongings in your own cellar? That's what I'm trying to figure out. I kept my voice level. Neutral. The worker said he saw a woman here last night. Around midnight. Carrying a box and a shovel. Clara's laugh was too loud, too bright. A woman? At midnight? Mom, that's ridiculous. Who would? She stopped abruptly, her eyes widening. Wait. You don't think Mom, I was home with Daniel all night. We watched a movie and went to bed around 10. You can ask him. I wasn't accusing you. But you were thinking it. Her voice cracked with hurt. I can see it in your face. You think I snuck over here in the middle of the night like some kind of criminal. After everything I've done for this family. After all the time I spent taking care of Charles before he died. This is how you repay me? The tears came quickly, expertly. She collapsed onto the porch steps, her shoulders shaking with sobs. And for a moment, just a moment, I almost believed her. Almost rushed to comfort her. Almost apologized for doubting. Then I remembered the smell of burned paper in the cellar. The fresh earth. Mason's terrified face. Charles's voice in my memory, trust your instincts, Jess. They've never steered you wrong. I sat down beside Clara, maintaining a careful distance. I'm not accusing anyone. I'm just trying to understand. She wiped her eyes, mascara streaking her perfect cheeks. That maintenance worker probably saw a deer or a shadow and let his imagination run wild. You know how people are. They see what they want to see. Maybe. And the locket, Charles probably buried it himself years ago. Maybe it belonged to his mother or an old girlfriend. Men keep sentimental things. It doesn't mean anything sinister. Perhaps you're right. But I was studying her hands as she spoke. The way her fingers twisted together. The way her left eye twitched, just barely, when she mentioned the locket. The way her breathing quickened when I mentioned the maintenance worker. Clara stood abruptly. I should go. Daniel will worry if I'm gone too long. She leaned down and kissed my cheek, her lips cold. Promise me you'll let this go, Mom. Don't let some stranger's wild story poison your memories of Charles. He loved you. That's all that matters. I watched her drive away, tires spitting gravel. Then I went inside, locked every door, and called Sheriff Morrison. The evidence bag, I said without preamble. Before you seal it completely, I need to see those papers one more time. Morrison brought the bag to my house 2 hours later, his expression wary. 5 minutes, Jessica. That's all I can give you. This is evidence now. Chain of custody and all that. 5 minutes is all I need. He spread the contents across my kitchen table, each item carefully tagged and photographed. The locket. The melted pen. And the papers, fragments really. Blackened edges. Missing corners. Words reduced to carbon shadows. But words nonetheless. I pulled on the cotton gloves Morrison offered and carefully lifted the largest fragment. Most of it was illegible, legal jargon transformed into ash. But near the bottom, protected by layers of paper above it, a section remained intact. My breath caught. Hereby grant full guardianship of the minor child to Marianne H. The rest was burned away. But that name. Marianne. My vision blurred. The kitchen tilted. Morrison's hand on my shoulder was the only thing keeping me upright. You know that name, he said. It wasn't a question. Charles's assistant, I whispered. 25 years ago. She worked for him at the accounting firm. Sweet girl. Young. Maybe 22, 23. She was only there for about a year, then she left suddenly. Charles said she'd moved to take care of a sick relative. Morrison's jaw tightened. Guardianship of a minor child. I looked up at him, and I could see my own realization reflected in his eyes. When did she leave? Morrison asked quietly. My hands were shaking so badly I had to set down the paper fragment. Spring of 1999. And when was Daniel born? The room spun. December 1999. 9 months. 9 months from the time Marianne vanished to the time my grandson was born. No, I breathed. No, that's not possible. Daniel is, but I couldn't finish the sentence. Because Daniel was adopted. We'd always known that. Clara had been open about it from the beginning. Some private adoption arranged through a lawyer friend. Closed records. No contact with the birth mother. We'd never questioned it. Never thought to question it. I need to see the photo in the locket again, I told Morrison. He carefully opened the evidence bag and removed the locket, holding it so I could see the photograph inside without touching it. The woman standing beside Charles. The baby in her arms. I'd thought the face looked familiar. Now I knew why. She had Daniel's eyes. Daniel's nose. Daniel's smile. And Charles, young, healthy Charles, had his hand resting on her shoulder with an intimacy that spoke of more than professional courtesy. Sweet merciful God, Morrison whispered. I stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. I need my photo albums. Jessica. Now, Tom. Please. He followed me to the study where I kept decades of memories organized in leather-bound albums. My hands shook as I pulled down the one labeled 1998 to 1999. I flipped through pages of birthday parties and holidays and ordinary moments until... There. A company picnic. Charles's accounting firm. Summer 1998. And standing in the background, barely visible but unmistakable, Marianne. Young, pretty, dark-haired. Her hand resting protectively over her abdomen in a gesture that women have made since the beginning of time. The gesture of a woman carrying new life. Beneath the photo, in my own handwriting, a date, July 18, 1998. Exactly 9 months before Daniel was born. I sank into Charles's old leather chair, the album falling from my hands. Morrison caught it before it hit the floor. Charles had a child, I whispered. With Marianne. And somehow Clara knows. She knows, and she's been hiding it. But why? Why would she? The answer hit me like a physical blow. The will. Charles had changed his will 3 weeks before he died. He'd told me it was just routine updates. Estate planning. Nothing important. But what if it wasn't routine? What if he'd discovered something about Daniel? About his true parentage? What if he'd changed the will to include, or exclude, someone? And what if Clara knew? My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, check your mailbox. Don't let anyone see. M. Mason. I looked at Morrison. I need to check something. What's going on? I don't know yet. But I'm going to find out. I walked outside, Morrison trailing behind me, and opened the mailbox. Inside was a manila envelope, unsealed. I pulled out a single sheet of paper, a printout from what looked like a property records website. At the top, guardianship transfer document, filed March 15, 1999, County Clerk's Office. And below that, in faded typescript. Guardian, Marianne Helen Prescott minor child, Daniel Charles Prescott transfer of guardianship to Clara Marie Prescott. My knees buckled. Morrison caught me. Clara wasn't just Daniel's wife. She was his sister. And the child in that photograph, the baby Marianne held in her arms, was the man Clara had married. Which meant everything, the marriage, the inheritance, the midnight burial of evidence, was built on a lie so monstrous it defied comprehension. I looked up at Morrison, tears streaming down my face. We need to find Marianne, I whispered. We need to find her now. Because somewhere in this nightmare of secrets and lies, there was a woman who held the key to everything. A woman who'd vanished 25 years ago, carrying Charles's child. A woman whose daughter had just married her own brother. And I had a terrible, sickening feeling that I knew exactly why Clara had been so desperate to burn the evidence. Because some secrets are worth killing for. The manila envelope sat on my kitchen table like a bomb waiting to detonate. Morrison had left an hour ago, taking the evidence with him but leaving behind a warning: "Don't do anything rash, Jessica. Let me investigate this properly." But proper investigations took time. Warrants. Legal procedures. And every instinct in my body screamed that time was a luxury I couldn't afford. I stared at the name on the printout: Mary Ann Helen Prescott. Prescott. Clara's maiden name. The coincidence was too glaring to ignore, yet everyone had missed it. Or perhaps no one had thought to look. Why would they? Clara had come into our lives as Daniel's college sweetheart, a bright young woman with impeccable credentials and a tragic backstory. Parents killed in a car accident when she was 19, raised by her grandmother who'd since passed. No family. No roots. Just Clara, alone in the world, grateful to be welcomed into ours. We'd eaten it up. Every word. Every tear. Every perfectly crafted lie. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone. There was one person who might have answers. One person Charles had trusted with his most private matters. Dr. Raymond Everett had been Charles's physician for 30 years. More than that, he'd been his confidant, his poker buddy, his friend. If Charles had secrets, Ray would know. The phone rang 4 times before his familiar gravel voice answered. "Jessica? Is everything all right?" "Ray, I need to ask you something." "Something about Charles." My voice cracked. "Something he might have told you in confidence." A long pause. "Jessica, you know I can't breach doctor-patient confidentiality. Even after death, there are ethical." "Did Charles ever ask you about paternity testing?" The silence that followed was deafening. "Ray? Where is this coming from?" His voice had changed. Guarded now. Careful. "I found something. In the cellar. Evidence that Charles may have had a child before we married. A daughter." I swallowed hard. "A daughter named Clara." I heard him exhale slowly. "Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. You knew." "I didn't know. But Charles came to me about 15 years ago. Asked hypothetical questions about DNA testing. How accurate it was. Whether it could prove paternity conclusively. Whether old samples could still be viable after years." Ray's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "He never told me details. Just said he'd made a mistake in his youth. Said there might be a child out there he'd never known about. Asked if it was possible to verify without the other party knowing." My stomach lurched. "What did you tell him?" I told him yes. Modern testing could do that. But I also told him to think carefully before opening that door. Some secrets, once revealed, destroy everything. Ray paused. He never brought it up again. I assumed he'd decided to let sleeping dogs lie. "He didn't let anything lie," I said bitterly. "He changed his will 3 weeks before he died. And now his alleged daughter is married to Daniel, and she's been systematically destroying evidence of her connection to Charles." Dear God. Ray's breathing had become labored. "Jessica, listen to me very carefully. If what you're saying is true, if Clara is Charles's biological daughter and she married Daniel, we're not just talking about deception. We're talking about something far worse. Incest," I whispered. The word tasted like poison. "Does Daniel know?" "I don't think so. I don't think either of them knew. But Clara found out somehow. Maybe when Charles changed his will. Maybe she saw documents she wasn't supposed to see." My mind raced. "Ray, I need proof. Real proof. Not just burned papers and speculation." "What are you asking me to do?" "I need a DNA test." "Can you run one discreetly? Without involving the police yet?" Another long pause. "If you can get me samples from both Clara and Charles, yes." I can have a friend at the university lab run them as a favor. Rush results. 48 hours. Charles's shaving kit is still in our bathroom. I haven't touched it since he died. That'll work. Hair, razor, toothbrush, anything with follicle or cellular material. And Clara? I closed my eyes. I'll figure it out. Daniel and Clara lived 15 minutes away in a pristine colonial that Charles had helped them buy as a wedding present. I'd been there dozens of times. I had a key. And Clara, I knew from her social media posts that morning, was at a charity luncheon until 3 p.m. I felt like a criminal as I let myself in. The house smelled of vanilla and expensive candles. Everything was immaculate: white furniture, chrome fixtures, abstract art on walls the color of clouds. It looked like a magazine spread. Unlived in. Impersonal. I climbed the stairs to the master bedroom, my heart hammering so violently I thought it might break through my ribs. Clara's vanity sat in the corner, covered with cosmetics and perfumes arranged in perfect rows. And there, on a silver tray, was her hairbrush. I pulled a plastic bag from my purse with shaking hands and carefully removed several strands of blonde hair from the bristles, making sure to get the roots. Then I returned the brush to its exact position and fled. I was in my car, pulling out of the driveway, when my phone rang. Clara. My blood turned to ice. Had she somehow known I was there? Did she have cameras I hadn't noticed? I let it ring 3 times before answering, trying to control my breathing. Hello, sweetheart. Mom. Her voice was bright, cheerful. I'm so glad I caught you. I wanted to apologize for earlier. I was upset and I overreacted. Can I take you to lunch tomorrow? My treat. We can talk properly. Every word was honey. Every syllable a trap. That would be lovely, I heard myself say. Perfect. Il Giardino at noon? She laughed, that tinkling, musical laugh that had once charmed me. I'll make reservations. And Mom? I really am sorry. Family is everything to me. You know that. I know, I lied. We said our goodbyes, and I sat in the car for a full minute afterward, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Family is everything to me. The words echoed in my mind with sinister new meaning. Dr. Everett met me in the parking lot of a Walgreens 30 minutes later. I handed him the bags, one containing Charles's old electric razor with trapped facial hair, the other with Clara's brush strands. He didn't ask questions. Just nodded grimly and promised to call as soon as he had results. I drove home in a daze, my mind cycling through impossible scenarios. How had this happened? How had Charles not known? How had Clara found out? And most importantly, what did she want? Mason's business card was still in my pocket. On impulse, I dialed his number. He answered on the first ring. Mrs. Sharpe? Mason, you said you once worked security for Charles. After a break-in? Yes, ma'am. Must have been 12, 13 years ago. Someone tried to get into the house while you and Mr. Sharpe were on vacation. Triggered the alarm. Police came but whoever it was had already fled. Mr. Sharpe hired me and a couple other guys to patrol the property nights for a few months after. Did you ever see anyone suspicious? Just once. His voice tightened. Young woman. Maybe early 20s. Blonde. She was standing at the edge of your property line one night, just watching the house. When I approached, she ran. I reported it to Mr. Sharpe, gave him a description. He went pale. Told me to call him immediately if I ever saw her again. My mouth went dry. Did you? No. She never came back. At least not while I was working. He paused. Why? Does this connect to? What did she look like? Exactly. Tall. Slim. Blonde hair, long. Pretty. She had this way of moving, graceful, almost like a dancer. And her eyes. He trailed off. I only saw her face for a second when my flashlight caught her, but her eyes were distinctive. Very light blue. Almost gray. Clara's eyes. Mrs. Sharpe? Are you still there? I'm here. My voice sounded hollow. Mason, can you do something for me? Can you check if there are any records of that break-in? Police reports? Anything with details? I can try. Might take a day or two. Do it. Please. After we hung up, I sat in my driveway, staring at my house, the house Charles and I had built 40 years ago, where we'd raised our family, where we'd grown old together. It suddenly looked foreign. Hostile. How many times had Clara been here? How many times had she walked through these rooms, touching our things, eating at our table, sleeping in our guest room, all while hiding the truth about who she was? My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, the key. Just those 2 words. Then another text, check the cellar lock. Compare it to the key Clara gave you. I got out of the car and walked to the cellar door. The new lock gleamed in the afternoon sun, brass, modern, expensive. Clara had insisted on replacing it along with all the other locks. For your safety. I pulled out the key she'd given me and slid it into the lock. It turned smoothly. Perfectly. Then I examined the lock more carefully. On the bottom, in tiny letters, installed March 15th, 25. March 15th. 2 weeks before Charles died. My blood ran cold. Clara had changed this lock while Charles was still alive. Which meant she'd had access to the cellar before his death. Access he didn't know about. And if she'd changed the lock before he died, she must have had a reason. Something in this cellar she needed to protect. Or hide. Or destroy. I thought about the burned documents. The locket. The guardianship papers. Clara hadn't been destroying evidence after Charles's death. She'd been hiding it before. Which meant she'd been planning something. 4 weeks. Maybe months. And Charles, dear, trusting Charles, had never suspected. Or had he? I remembered his last days. How distracted he'd seemed. How he'd spent hours in his study, door closed, phone calls he wouldn't discuss. How he'd suddenly insisted on updating his will. How he'd asked me, seemingly out of nowhere, Jess, if you discovered I'd done something terrible, something unforgivable, would you still love me? I'd laughed it off. Kissed his cheek. Told him nothing could make me stop loving him. But he hadn't been asking hypothetically. He'd been confessing. And 3 weeks later, he was dead. My phone rang. Dr. Everett. Jessica. His voice was strained. I pulled some strings. Rush job. The preliminary results are in. I couldn't breathe. And? Based on DNA comparison between the samples you provided. Charles and Clara share approximately 50% genetic material. The world tilted. She's his daughter, Jessica. No question. The markers are conclusive. I sank onto the cellar steps, my legs unable to support me any longer. There's something else, Ray continued. The lab tech noticed something unusual. Clara's DNA shows markers consistent with genetic testing having been done previously. Within the last year. Professional grade testing. What does that mean? It means Clara already knew. She's known for at least a year. Maybe longer. The phone slipped from my hand. Clara had known she was Charles's daughter. Known when she met Daniel. Known when she married him. Known every single day she'd smiled at me across the dinner table and called me Mom. She'd known everything. And she'd done it anyway. But why? I picked up the phone, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped it again. Ray, I need you to do something else. I need you to pull Charles's medical records from his last 6 months. Specifically, any toxicology work that was done. Jessica. Please. I need to know if he was poisoned. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I'll make some calls, Ray finally said. But Jessica, if you're right about this, if Clara knew, and she married Daniel anyway, and then Charles died suddenly. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Because we were both thinking the same thing. Clara hadn't just been hiding a secret. She'd been executing a plan. And Charles's death might not have been natural at all. Dr. Everett called back at 11:47 p.m. I'd been sitting in Charles's study for hours, surrounded by file boxes and old financial records, searching for something, anything, that might explain the inexplicable. The house was dark except for the desk lamp, and when my phone buzzed, I jumped so violently that I knocked over a stack of bank statements. Ray? My voice was hoarse. I'd been crying on and off for hours. I pulled in every favor I had left. He sounded exhausted. Defeated. Jessica, I need you to sit down. I'm already sitting. Then hold on to something. I gripped the edge of Charles's mahogany desk, the wood smooth and familiar under my palms. How many times had I perched on this desk while Charles worked, chatting about our day? How many times had he looked up at me with those warm brown eyes and smiled? Charles's initial toxicology screening was clean, Ray began. Standard protocol for sudden cardiac death. They checked for the usual suspects, cocaine, amphetamines, common cardiac drugs taken in excess. Everything came back negative, so they ruled it natural causes. But my heart was hammering. But I had a friend at the lab run a more comprehensive panel. Extended screening that's not normally done unless there's specific suspicion of foul play. Jessica. He paused, and I heard him swallow hard. Charles's blood showed elevated levels of digitalis. Significantly elevated. The room spun. Digitalis. That's derived from foxglove. Used therapeutically to treat certain heart conditions, but in high doses, it causes cardiac arrest that can mimic a natural heart attack. Especially in older patients. His voice cracked. Jessica, Charles was taking daily supplements and vitamins. If someone had been adding digitalis to them over several weeks, building up the levels in his system slowly, the cumulative effect would be catastrophic. And nearly impossible to detect without specifically looking for it. I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. There's more, Ray continued. I checked pharmacy records. 3 months before Charles died, Clara filled a prescription for digitalis. Low dose. The prescription was written by a Dr. Helena Marsh, a cardiologist in the city. Clara has a heart condition? No. I called Dr. Marsh's office. The prescription was supposedly for stress-related heart palpitations. But Jessica, Clara never kept any follow-up appointments. She filled the prescription once, got a 3-month supply, and never went back. My hand flew to my mouth. She needed it for Charles. That would be my conclusion. And before you ask, yes, I've already contacted Sheriff Morrison. He's reopening the investigation into Charles's death as a possible homicide. But Jessica, this is circumstantial. A good defense attorney could argue the prescription was legitimate, that Clara never used it, that there's no direct evidence linking her to. I'll find the evidence, I said through gritted teeth. I'll find it if it's the last thing I do. After we hung up, I sat in the darkness, rage and grief warring inside my chest. Clara had poisoned my husband. Fed him death in small, measured doses while smiling at him across the breakfast table. While holding his hand. While calling him Dad. And I had watched it happen. Had thanked her for being so devoted. So helpful. So caring. The memory made me want to vomit. I forced myself to focus. Ray was right, we needed more than circumstantial evidence. We needed proof of intent. Documentation. A clear trail from Clara to Charles's death. I turned back to the desk and began searching with new purpose. Charles had been meticulous about record keeping. Every receipt, every bill, every bank statement filed and organized. But as I dug deeper into the files from the last year of his life, I noticed something odd. Gaps. Statements missing from specific months. Receipts removed from their chronological order. And in one folder marked estate planning, nothing but empty plastic sleeves where documents should have been. Someone had cleaned this desk. Selectively. Carefully. But they'd missed something. Tucked behind a false panel at the back of the bottom drawer, a panel I'd only known about because Charles had shown it to me decades ago when we'd first bought the desk, I found a manila folder. Inside, photocopies of bank statements. Not our joint accounts. Offshore accounts. Places like the Cayman Islands and Singapore. And transactions. Dozens of them. Wire transfers moving money from Charles's business accounts to these offshore holdings. Amounts ranging from 10,000 to 10,000 to 10,000 to 50,000. Always just under the threshold that would trigger automatic federal reporting. The transfers had started 18 months ago. Shortly after Clara married Daniel. And the signature authorizing them, Charles's signature, looked wrong. Too neat. Too consistent. Charles's real signature had always been a hasty scrawl, barely legible. These signatures were careful. Practiced. Forged. I pulled out my phone and photographed every page, my hands shaking so badly that I had to take several shots of each document to ensure clarity. The total amount transferred, nearly $2.3 million. Charles's life savings. His business. Everything he'd built, siphoned away systematically while he was being slowly poisoned. I thought about the burned papers in the cellar. The half-destroyed guardianship documents. Now I understood. Clara hadn't just been hiding her identity. She'd been covering up financial fraud. She'd stolen Charles's money, then killed him to prevent discovery. And now she was positioning herself to inherit everything that remained. I waited until morning, 7 a.m., before calling Daniel. My hands had stopped shaking somewhere around 4 a.m., replaced by cold, crystalline fury. Mom? Daniel's voice was groggy. It's early. Is everything okay? I need to talk to you. Now. It's about Clara. A pause. What about Clara? I'm coming over. Don't wake her. I need to speak with you alone. Mom, you're scaring me. Good, I said, and hung up. Daniel was waiting on his front porch when I arrived, dressed in sweatpants and a Georgetown t-shirt, his dark hair standing up in sleep-tousled spikes. He looked so young. So vulnerable. My beautiful grandson who had no idea he'd married his own aunt. Who had no idea his wife was a murderer. What's going on? He asked as I climbed out of the car. I handed him the folder of photocopied bank statements. Look at these. Tell me what you see. He flipped through them, his brow furrowing. These are Grandpa's accounts. But I don't understand, these offshore transfers, why would he? Look at the signatures. Daniel studied them more carefully. Then his face went pale. These aren't Grandpa's signatures. No. They're forgeries. Someone's been systematically draining Charles's accounts. Nearly $2.3 million over 18 months. Who would? He stopped. Looked up at me. No. No, you can't possibly think Clara. Clara filled a prescription for Digitalis 3 months before your grandfather died. A heart medication that, in high doses, causes cardiac arrest. Charles died of a sudden heart attack that showed elevated levels of Digitalis in his blood. Daniel's face had gone from pale to gray. That's insane. Clara would never. Clara is Charles's biological daughter. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Daniel stared at me. What? Your grandfather had an affair 26 years ago. With a woman named Marianne Prescott. Clara's mother. Clara is your grandfather's daughter. Which makes her your aunt. I watched him process this, watched the horror bloom across his face. She knew, Daniel. She's known for at least a year. Maybe longer. And she married you anyway. He shook his head violently. No. No, that's not, there's been a mistake. DNA test. Confirmed yesterday. 50% genetic match. Daniel's legs gave out. He sat down hard on the porch steps, the folder falling from his hands, papers scattering across the wooden planks. Oh God. Oh God, she and I, we've been. I know. My voice broke. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. But it gets worse. Clara helps with your finances, doesn't she? He nodded mutely. Show me. Show me her handwriting. Daniel led me inside on shaking legs. Clara was still asleep upstairs. I could hear water running, the shower. We had maybe 10 minutes. In the home office, Daniel pulled out a folder of paid bills. She handles most of the paperwork. Says it takes stress off me while I'm building the business. I spread the bills across the desk and compared them to the signatures on the offshore account transfers. Perfect match. The same careful loops. The same measured pressure. The same practiced forgery of Charles's name. Jesus Christ, Daniel whispered. She's been stealing from us. From Grandpa. He looked at me with wild eyes. Mom, if she did this, if she forged these documents and poisoned Grandpa, we have to call the police. Right now. I already have. Sheriff Morrison is reopening the investigation. But Daniel, we need more. We need everything. Every document she's ever touched. Every file on her computer. Every storage unit, Daniel said suddenly. She has a storage unit. Over in Millbrook. She said it was for her grandmother's things from before she died. I've never been there. My pulse quickened. Do you have the key? She keeps it on her key ring. But. He glanced toward the stairs. The shower had stopped. I know which facility. I saw a bill once. Miller's self-storage on Route 9. Can you get me in? She has the only key. The unit's under her name. They won't let anyone else. Call Mason, I said, pulling out my phone. Tell him to meet us there. Now. Mason arrived at Miller's self-storage 30 minutes later with a worn leather tool kit and a grim expression. You know this is breaking and entering. Breaking, yes. Entering, maybe. Discovering evidence of fraud and murder, definitely. I gestured to the rows of orange storage units. Unit 47B. Can you open it? He looked at Daniel, who nodded. Please. I need to know what she's been hiding. Mason pulled out a set of lockpicks. I learned a few things in the army. But Mrs. Sharpe, if we find what you think we're going to find, you need to call the sheriff immediately. No touching anything. No moving anything. Clean chain of evidence. Agreed. The lock popped open in under 3 minutes. Mason pulled up the rolling door, and we stood in the entrance, staring. The unit was immaculate. Organized. Terrifying. Filing cabinets lined one wall. A desk with a laptop sat in the center. Cork boards covered in photographs, documents, and red string covered another wall, a conspiracy theorist's dream, except this conspiracy was real. And at the center of the largest board, a photograph of Charles. Around it, connected by red string, photos of me, Daniel, Clara herself, and a woman I didn't recognize, young, dark-haired, beautiful. The caption underneath read, Marianne Prescott, 1998 to 2024. She's dead, I whispered. Marianne is dead. Daniel moved to the filing cabinets and pulled open the top drawer. Inside, meticulously organized folders. Sharpe family assets. Property deeds. Will drafts. Insurance policies. He pulled out the will folder with trembling hands and opened it. Inside were 3 versions of Charles's will. The original from 10 years ago, leaving everything to me. A forged version dated 2 months before Charles's death, leaving substantial portions to Clara Marie Sharpe, beloved daughter-in-law. And a final version, the one Charles had actually signed 3 weeks before his death, that disinherited Clara completely. Attached to the final version was a handwritten note in Charles's distinctive scrawl. To be opened only in the event of my unexpected death. Clara Marie Prescott is my biological daughter, born to Mary Ann Prescott in 1999. I discovered this truth 6 months ago when Clara blackmailed me with DNA evidence. She demanded money and inheritance. I refused. She threatened to expose the relationship to Jessica and Daniel. I have since learned Clara's true intentions and have removed her from my will entirely. If I die suddenly, investigate Clara. She is dangerous. She is unstable. And she is capable of anything. Charles Sebastian Sharpe. The note was dated April 15th. 1 week before Charles died. Daniel dropped the folder like it had burned him. Papers scattered across the concrete floor. He knew, Daniel breathed. Grandpa knew she was going to kill him. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and called Sheriff Morrison. Tom. We found it. All of it. Clara's storage unit. You need to get here now. On my way. Jessica, don't touch anything else. But Mason was already at the desk, opening the laptop. It's not password protected. She wasn't expecting anyone to find this. The screen glowed to life, revealing an open document. Project Inheritance, Final Phase. Phase 1, Complete. Establish relationship with Daniel Sharpe. Phase 2, Complete. Marriage and integration into family. Phase 3, Complete. Blackmail Charles for initial payment. Phase 4, Complete. Eliminate Charles before will change is processed. Phase 5, Complete. Secure primary inheritance through Jessica. Phase 6, In progress. Eliminate Jessica, accident/natural causes. Target date, November 2025. Phase 7, Pending. Daniel inheritance upon Jessica's death. Estimated total, $8.7 million. The screen blurred. I realized I was crying. She'd planned it all. Every step. Every smile. Every kindness. And I was next. Mom. Daniel's voice was hollow. She's going to kill you. I looked at the date on the document. Last modified, October 20th. 3 days ago. And beneath the main document was a subfolder labeled Methods. Mason clicked it open before I could stop him. Inside, detailed plans. Staged car accidents. Accidental falls downstairs. Medication tampering. Even a drafted obituary. Jessica Ann Sharpe, 69, passed away peacefully in her sleep on November 15, 2025, surrounded by loving family. Jesus, Mason whispered. My phone rang. Clara. I stared at the screen, my blood turning to ice. Don't answer it, Daniel said. But I did. Because I needed to hear her voice. Needed to know if I could detect the monster beneath the mask. Mom. Clara's voice was bright, cheerful. Just wanted to confirm lunch today. Il Giardino at noon. I'm so looking forward to it. I have something special planned. Something special planned. My eyes fell back to the laptop screen. To Phase 6. To the target date just 3 weeks away. I'll be there, I heard myself say. Perfect. See you soon. Love you, Mom. She hung up. I stood frozen, staring at the phone. You're not actually going, Daniel said. No. I looked at Mason. But we need her to think I am. We need to buy time until Sheriff Morrison can make an arrest. Mason nodded slowly. I'll watch the house. If she comes anywhere near you. She won't. Not yet. She's patient. Methodical. I gestured to the conspiracy boards. This has been years in the making. She'll wait for the perfect moment. The perfect alibi. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. Got your message. Looking into Clara Prescott's background. Found something you need to see. Can you meet? Robert Lane. Robert Lane. Charles's old friend from the district attorney's office. He'd retired 5 years ago to open a private investigation firm. I'd sent him everything I'd found last night, the DNA results, the bank statements, the offshore accounts. I texted back, where and when? My office. 2 hours. Come alone. And Jessica, be careful. This woman is more dangerous than you know. I looked around the storage unit one final time. At the evidence of months, years, of planning. Of patience. Of absolute, calculated evil. Clara wasn't just a murderer. She was a predator who'd been stalking us for years, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And according to her timeline, she wasn't done with me yet. Robert Lane's office smelled of old leather and coffee that had been sitting too long on the burner. He was waiting when I arrived, a bear of a man with silver hair and sharp eyes that had seen too many crimes and not enough justice. Jessica. He stood, gesturing to a chair across from his cluttered desk. I'm sorry about Charles. He was a good man. Better than most. He was. My voice was steady. Stronger than I felt. What did you find? Robert slid a thick folder across the desk. Clara Marie Prescott. Born December 3, 1999, in Mercy General Hospital. Mother, Mary Ann Helen Prescott. Father, listed as unknown, but we know better now. He opened the folder, revealing a timeline. Mary Ann died 6 months ago. Ovarian cancer. But here's what's interesting. 3 days before she died, she had a visitor at the hospice. A young blonde woman who signed in as Claire Peterson. Clara. The nurses remembered her because she stayed for hours. And after that visit, Mary Ann became agitated. Kept saying something about, he needs to know, and tell Jessica the truth. She tried to call someone repeatedly but was too weak to complete the calls. She died 2 days later. My chest tightened. What was she trying to say? I think Mary Ann was trying to warn you. Trying to tell you who Clara really was. But Clara got to her first. Robert pulled out another document. After Mary Ann died, Clara cleaned out her mother's apartment. Took everything. And that's when the guardianship papers surfaced. That's when Clara discovered Charles was her father. But she already knew, I protested. The DNA tests were done a year ago. No. Clara suspected for years. But Mary Ann never confirmed it. Never told Clara who her father was. It wasn't until Clara found the guardianship documents after Mary Ann's death that she had proof. Robert's jaw tightened. And that's when she came hunting for her inheritance. I thought of Charles's note. She blackmailed me with DNA evidence. Clara contacted Charles about 7 months ago, Robert continued. Showed up at his office with the documents and a DNA test kit. Demanded he take it. When it came back positive, she demanded money. A lot of money. Charles refused. Said she couldn't prove he was her father to anyone else because Mary Ann was dead and the original guardianship documents had been sealed decades ago. So Clara decided to marry into the family instead. Not quite that simple. Robert pulled out a photograph. A young Clara, maybe 19 or 20, standing outside our house. The date stamp read, August 2018. Clara's been watching your family for years. Long before Mary Ann died. She found Daniel on social media. Tracked his movements. engineered their chance meeting at a coffee shop near his campus. The whole relationship was calculated from day one. My stomach turned. Daniel never had a chance. None of you did. Clara's patient. Methodical. And according to her therapist's notes, yes, I obtained them through less than legal means. She has severe narcissistic personality disorder with sociopathic tendencies. She believes the world owes her. Specifically, she believes your family owes her for Charles's abandonment of her mother. Charles didn't even know Marianne was pregnant. Doesn't matter to Clara. In her mind, Charles stole her childhood. Stole the life she deserved. And she's been planning revenge for years. Robert leaned back in his chair. Jessica, this woman is dangerous. She's already killed once. She won't hesitate to do it again. Sheriff Morrison is building a case, but it'll take time. Warrants. Lawyers. She could flee. Or finish what she started and kill me first. Exactly. I stared at the timeline on Robert's wall. At the photographs of Clara over the years, watching, waiting, plotting. At the evidence of a decade-long obsession with destroying the family she believed had destroyed her. I have an idea, I said slowly. But it's risky. Robert raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. The plan was simple, elegant, and absolutely terrifying. One final dinner. Jessica Sharpe invites her beloved daughter-in-law and grandson to her home for a reconciliation meal. Peace offerings. Apologies for recent suspicions. A chance to heal the family's wounds. Except the dining room would be wired with cameras and microphones. Robert's team would be monitoring from a van outside. Sheriff Morrison and 2 deputies would be positioned in my garage, ready to move on Robert's signal. And I would do what I'd never been good at, I would lie. I would smile at the woman who murdered my husband. I would break bread with her. I would make her feel safe, comfortable, superior. And then I would make her confess. It's dangerous, Robert had warned. If she suspects anything, if she realizes it's a trap, she could panic. Get violent. You'd be alone with her for at least a few minutes before we could intervene. I know. Jessica, you don't have to do this. We have enough evidence to. No, we don't. Not for murder. The digitalis is circumstantial. The forged signatures could be explained away. The storage unit shows intent, but a good lawyer could argue it was just fantasy. Dark thoughts she never planned to act on. I'd looked Robert straight in the eye. We need her confession. On tape. Undeniable. He'd studied me for a long moment, then nodded. You're braver than I gave you credit for. No, I'd said quietly. I'm just angrier than I am afraid. The technicians arrived at dawn, dressed as cable repair workers. They installed pinhole cameras in the light fixtures, microphones in the floral centerpiece, and a panic button under the dining table within easy reach of my seat. One press, the lead technician said, demonstrating. We'll be inside in less than 30 seconds. 30 seconds. An eternity when someone's holding a knife to your throat. I called Daniel first. Sweetheart, I've been thinking. About everything that's happened. About Clara. I let my voice crack slightly. I think I've been unfair. Jumping to conclusions. The stress of losing Charles, the grief, it's made me paranoid. I'd like to apologize. To both of you. Over dinner tonight. Just the 3 of us. Silence on the other end. Then, Mom, are you sure? After everything we found. I know what we found. But I've been thinking, maybe there's an explanation. Maybe Clara was trying to help Charles with his finances and got in over her head. Maybe the storage unit was her way of organizing estate documents. Maybe I've been seeing monsters where there are none. The lies tasted like ash. Please, Daniel. I need to try. For Charles. For our family. Another pause. Let me talk to Clara. 20 minutes later, he called back. She says yes. She's actually relieved. She's been so worried about you, Mom. About the accusations. She wants a chance to explain everything. I bet she does. 7 o'clock, I said. I'll make Charles's favorite pot roast. The irony wasn't lost on me. The last meal Clara would eat as a free woman would be prepared by the woman she'd planned to murder. I spent the afternoon cooking. Peeling potatoes with shaking hands. Seasoning the roast. Setting the table with our good china, the pattern Charles and I had chosen for our wedding 43 years ago. At 6:45 p.m., Robert's voice crackled through the tiny earpiece they'd given me. We're in position. Remember, stay calm. Ask open-ended questions. Let her talk. Narcissists love to brag. At 6:58 p.m., headlights swept across the front windows. They were here. I opened the door with a smile that felt like broken glass on my face. Daniel stood on the porch looking worried and hopeful. And beside him, Clara. She wore black, a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. Her blonde hair was pulled back in an elegant chignon. Diamond earrings, Charles's last Christmas gift to her, she told us, sparkled in the porch light. She looked like she was dressed for a funeral. Mom. Clara's voice was warm honey. She stepped forward and embraced me, and I had to fight every instinct not to recoil. She smelled of expensive perfume and something else. Something chemical and wrong. Thank you for this. I've been so worried about you. I've been worried about myself, I said, pulling back. Please, come in. Dinner's almost ready. We moved to the dining room, and I watched Clara's eyes sweep the space. Looking for, what? Evidence? Threats? But she saw only what I wanted her to see, an old woman's dining room, familiar and safe. It smells wonderful, Daniel said, trying to fill the awkward silence. Just like Grandpa loved. Charles always said my pot roast was the secret to our long marriage. I met Clara's eyes. Of course, I thought we had many more years ahead of us. But the heart is unpredictable, isn't it? Something flickered across Clara's face. Very unpredictable. We sat. I served. The food was perfect, tender, flavorful, carefully prepared. No one ate much. I found something yesterday, I said casually, cutting my roast into small pieces. Charles's old will. The one from 10 years ago. Before he made all those changes last spring. Clara's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Oh. It's interesting to see how his thinking evolved. How his priorities changed. I took a sip of water. He was always so careful about estate planning. So thorough. Charles never did anything without thinking it through completely. Grandpa was meticulous, Daniel agreed. He was. I looked directly at Clara. That's why I found it so strange. The timing of his final will change. 3 weeks before his death. Almost like he knew something was going to happen. Clara set down her fork. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything. Just observing. I smiled. Charles always said he trusted you completely, Clara. Said you were so helpful with his paperwork. His medications. His daily routine. I tried to be. Clara's voice had gone flat. Cold. Of course you did. You were so devoted. Always making sure he took his vitamins. His supplements. I paused. His heart medication. The silence in the room was deafening. Daniel looked between us, confusion morphing into alarm. Mom, what are you? Tell me, Clara. I set down my own fork, my hands perfectly steady now. How long did it take? For the digitalis to build up in his system? Weeks? Months? Clara's face went very still. Very blank. I have no idea what you're talking about. Don't you? Because Dr. Everett found it fascinating. The levels in Charles's blood. The prescription you filled 3 months before he died. For a heart condition you didn't have. Mom. Daniel's voice was sharp with panic. Stop this. You said. I lied. I didn't break eye contact with Clara. I lied to get you both here. Because I needed the truth. And I needed it on record. Clara's eyes darted around the room, to the light fixtures, the centerpiece, back to me. I saw the moment she understood. The moment she realized she'd walked into a trap. Her laugh was cold, brittle. You think you're so clever. I think I'm a widow whose husband was murdered by his own daughter. Daniel made a strangled sound. Clara, tell her she's wrong. Tell her. Why should I? Clara stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood. Why should I lie anymore? Yes, I killed him. I killed Charles Sebastian Sharpe, the man who abandoned my mother. Who left her pregnant and alone and terrified. Who never even bothered to check if she was okay. He didn't know. I was on my feet now too. He didn't know Marianne was pregnant. He should have known. Clara's voice rose to a shriek. He should have cared enough to find out. Instead, he married you. Built this perfect little life. Had his perfect little family. While my mother worked 3 jobs to keep us fed. While I grew up in rat-infested apartments wearing second-hand clothes. While we struggled and suffered and barely survived. So you decided to take what you thought you were owed. I decided to take what was mine. Clara's face was flushed, her eyes wild. Every penny. Every property. Every single thing that should have been my inheritance. My birthright. By murdering him. By making him pay. Clara's smile was terrible. You should have seen his face when I told him who I was. When I showed him the DNA results. The guardianship papers. He went white as a sheet. Started babbling about how sorry he was. How he never knew. How he would make it right. She laughed. But he didn't make it right fast enough. He wanted lawyers. Trust funds. Gradual transfers. He wanted to control everything from beyond the grave. So you poisoned him. I gave him what he deserved. Clara's voice dropped to something almost tender. Almost loving. Every morning, I ground up the digitalis and mixed it into his vitamin powder. Watched him take it like a good little patient. Watched his hands start to shake. His breathing get labored. Watched him get weaker and weaker. Daniel had gone gray. Clara, stop. Please stop. But she couldn't stop. The narcissists need to be recognized, to be validated, to have her brilliance acknowledged. It poured out of her like poison. He begged me, you know. Clara's eyes were distant now, lost in the memory. At the end. The morning he died. He'd finally figured it out. Cornered me in his study. Said he knew what I'd been doing. Said he was going to the police. Her smile widened. So I gave him one final dose. Triple strength. Mixed into his morning coffee. Sat there and watched him drink it. Watched him realize what I'd done. Watched him try to reach for the phone, but his heart was already failing. He looked at me, right at me, and you know what he said? I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. Please, Clara whispered. Please don't hurt Jessica. Those were his last words. Not, I love you. Not, I'm sorry. But please don't hurt Jessica. She looked at me with pure hatred. Even dying, he chose you over me. His own daughter. Because you were killing him. Tears streamed down my face. Because you were a monster. I was a survivor. Clara's hand moved to the serving table, closing around the handle of the carving knife. And I'm not done surviving yet. Daniel lunged toward her. Clara, don't. But she was faster. Years of planning. Years of patience. Years of rage focused into one singular moment of violence. She came at me with the knife raised high, her face twisted into something inhuman. I slammed my palm on the panic button. Clara was 3 steps away when the dining room door exploded inward. Sheriff Morrison and 2 deputies, weapons drawn, shouting commands. She didn't stop. Didn't even slow down. Drop the knife. Clara's scream was primal, anguished. The knife came down. And Mason appeared from nowhere, tackling her from the side. They crashed into the china cabinet, glass shattering, dishes exploding across the floor. The knife skittered away. Deputies swarmed her. Handcuffs clicked. Miranda rights were read. And through it all, Clara screamed, "You destroyed the only family I ever wanted. You took him from me. You took everything. You destroyed yourself," I whispered. They hauled her up. Blood streamed from a cut on her forehead where she'd hit the cabinet. Her designer dress was torn. Her perfect hair had come loose. She looked at Daniel, her husband, her uncle, her victim, and for just a moment, something almost human flickered in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said. "I really did love you. In my own way." Daniel turned away, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. As they dragged Clara toward the door, she locked eyes with me one final time. "I'm Charles's daughter too," she said. "That makes me family. And you can't erase family, Jessica. No matter how hard you try." "No," I agreed quietly. "But I can make sure you pay for what you've done." The door closed behind her. The house fell silent except for the sound of Daniel's weeping and my own ragged breathing. Robert appeared in the doorway, his face grim but satisfied. "We got every word. The confession. The admission of murder. The attempted assault. She's going away for life, Jessica." I collapsed into my chair, my legs finally giving out. "It's over." "It's over," Robert confirmed. Daniel crossed the room and fell into my arms, and we held each other while my dining room, the site of 1,000 family dinners, 1,000 happy memories, became a crime scene. Mason approached quietly. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" "No." I looked up at him through my tears. "Thank you. You saved my life. I owed Mr. Sharpe a debt." His voice was thick with emotion. "I'm just glad I could repay it." As the police photographed evidence and collected the cameras and microphones, I sat in my ruined dining room holding my grandson, and I thought about Charles. About his last words, "Please don't hurt Jessica." Even dying, poisoned by his own daughter, betrayed by his own blood, he'd been trying to protect me. "I kept my promise, Charles," I whispered. "I found the truth. And I made her pay." Daniel pulled back, his face streaked with tears. "What do we do now?" I looked around at the shattered china, the broken glass, the blood on the hardwood floor. At the wreckage of the life Clara's lies had destroyed. "We survive," I said. "We heal. And we make sure the truth is told. Because that's what Charles would have wanted. That's what he died trying to give us. The truth." At last. The courthouse smelled of old wood and stale coffee. I sat in the 3rd row of the gallery, Daniel on my left, Robert Lane on my right. Behind us, the rows filled with reporters, curious onlookers, and people who'd read about the case in the papers, the socialite murderess, they called her. The black widow who'd killed for inheritance. They didn't know the half of it. Clara entered through the side door, flanked by corrections officers. 6 months in county jail had stripped away her polish. Her blonde hair hung limp and unwashed. The orange jumpsuit swallowed her frame, she'd lost at least 20 pounds. But her eyes, those were the same. Cold. Calculating. Unrepentant. She scanned the gallery until she found Daniel. Her face softened for just a moment, lips forming words I was grateful I couldn't hear. Daniel looked away. The bailiff's voice rang out, All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Moreno. The trial lasted 3 weeks. 3 weeks of evidence so damning, so irrefutable, that even Clara's high-priced defense attorney, paid for, ironically, with Charles's money, looked defeated by day 2. The prosecution presented the recordings first. Clara's voice filled the courtroom, cold and proud. I gave him what he deserved, watched him drink it. He looked at me and said, "Please don't hurt Jessica." Several jurors visibly flinched. One elderly woman in the back row wiped tears from her eyes. The toxicology reports came next. Dr. Everett testified about the digitalis levels in Charles's system, enough to kill a man twice his size. The prescription Clara had filled under a fake name. The careful, methodical poisoning that had taken place over months. This wasn't a crime of passion, Dr. Everett said, his voice heavy with professional detachment. This was premeditated murder, carried out with patience and precision. The bank records told their own story. Forged signatures. Transferred accounts. Stolen bonds. $600,000 systematically drained from Charles's estate over the course of 2 years. She was planning this from the moment she married into the family, the prosecutor argued. Every smile was calculated. Every kindness was manipulation. Clara Prescott Sharpe is a predator who saw an elderly man and his widow as nothing more than obstacles between her and what she believed she was owed. Clara's defense tried to paint her as a victim, a woman driven to desperation by a lifetime of abandonment. Her attorney brought up Marianne's death, the poverty of Clara's childhood, the pain of growing up without a father. My client suffered unimaginable hardship, the defense attorney argued. She made terrible choices, yes. But those choices were born of trauma, of a desperate need to reclaim what had been stolen from her. What had been stolen? The prosecutor's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. Charles Sharpe didn't even know Clara existed until she showed up with DNA evidence and demands for money. He offered to help her, to establish trust funds, to provide for her future. But that wasn't enough for Clara Prescott. She didn't want support. She wanted revenge. And she wanted every penny, even if she had to commit murder to get it. The defense crumbled under the weight of evidence. Clara's own recorded confession. The digitalis prescription. The forged documents. The storage unit filled with obsessive research. And then came the bombshell. On day 15 of the trial, the prosecution called a witness I hadn't been expecting, George Solis, Esquire. The man who shuffled to the witness stand bore little resemblance to the polished attorney whose business card I'd found in Clara's storage unit. Prison orange suited no one, but on George, a man who'd built his career on expensive suits and confident smiles, it was particularly devastating. "Mr. Solis," the prosecutor began, "please tell the court about your relationship with the defendant." George's voice was hollow. Defeated. "Clara contacted me 18 months ago. Said she needed help with estate planning. Complicated family situation. I didn't ask questions, attorneys rarely do when the money's good." "What did she hire you to do?" "Initially, standard document review. Looking over Charles Sharpe's existing will, identifying assets, that sort of thing." He swallowed hard. "But then she asked me to draft alternate versions of certain documents. Power of attorney forms. Trust modifications. She said she wanted to compare different approaches to estate division." "Did you know these documents would be used to forge Charles Sharpe's signature?" "No." George's eyes found mine across the courtroom. "Not at first. I swear, Mrs. Sharpe, I didn't know. But after Charles died, Clara called me. Said there were some discrepancies in the estate documents. Asked me to help smooth things over. That's when I realized what she'd done. What I'd helped her do. And what did you do with that realization?" George's voice cracked. "I took her money. $50,000 to keep quiet. To make the forged documents look legitimate if anyone questioned them. To be her insurance policy." He looked at the jury. "I'm not a killer. I never wanted Charles Sharpe to die. But I helped his murderer cover her tracks, and I'll have to live with that for the rest of my life. The courtroom erupted. Judge Moreno's gavel cracked like thunder. George Solis was led away in handcuffs. He'd already pled guilty to fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. 5 to 7 years, his own attorney had negotiated. A fraction of what Clara would face, but a lifetime of shame regardless. On day 20, Clara took the stand in her own defense. It was a disaster. She started strong, controlled, remorseful, speaking of her difficult childhood and the pain of discovering Charles's identity. But under cross-examination, the mask slipped. Isn't it true, Miss Prescott, that you married Daniel Sharpe not out of love, but to gain access to the family fortune? I loved Daniel. Clara's voice was ice. I still love him. You have a strange way of showing love. Lying to him. Using him. Planning to murder his mother once you'd secured the inheritance. I never planned to hurt Jessica. Clara's composure shattered. I just wanted what was mine. What Charles owed me. Charles Sharpe owed you nothing. He didn't know you existed. He should have known. Clara was on her feet now, trembling with rage. He should have checked. Should have cared. But he didn't, because I didn't matter. Because I was inconvenient. Because acknowledging me would have ruined his perfect little life with his perfect little wife. Sit down, Ms. Prescott. Judge Moreno's voice was steel. But Clara couldn't stop. The narcissists need to be heard, to be validated, to have her pain acknowledged. It consumed her. My mother died alone, she whispered. In a hospice room that smelled like bleach and death. And you know what her last words were? Find your father. Make him see you. So I did. I found him. And I made damn sure he saw me. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. First-degree murder. Fraud. Forgery. Conspiracy. Attempted murder. When the verdict was read, Clara didn't react. She simply sat there, stone-faced, as if her mind had retreated somewhere the law couldn't reach. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Clara Marie Prescott, Judge Moreno intoned, you have been found guilty of one of the most calculated, cold-blooded crimes this court has ever witnessed. You murdered a man who offered to help you. You manipulated and betrayed the family who welcomed you. You showed no remorse, no humanity, no recognition of the devastation you caused. Clara stared straight ahead. I hereby sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole. May you use that time to find whatever measure of conscience you've lost. Judge Moreno's gavel fell. Court is adjourned. As the corrections officers led Clara away, she turned one last time. Her eyes found Daniel's. I'm sorry, she mouthed. Daniel said nothing. He'd said everything he needed to say weeks ago, in my living room, when he'd fallen to his knees and begged my forgiveness. I should have seen it, Daniel had whispered, his face buried in his hands. All the signs were there. The way she isolated me from you and Grandpa. The way she always had excuses for why we couldn't visit. The way she controlled everything, my schedule, my finances, my phone calls. Love makes us blind, son. I'd pulled him into my arms. She was good at what she did. Practiced. Patient. You couldn't have known. But I should have believed you. When you said something was wrong. When you found the evidence. I called you paranoid. Grief-stricken. I chose her over you. You chose your wife over your mother. That's what you're supposed to do. I'd held him tighter. But now we know the truth. And we can heal. Together. He'd cried then, deep, racking sobs that seemed to come from somewhere ancient and broken inside him. And I'd held him the way I'd held him as a child, when nightmares woke him in the dark. We can still see again, I'd whispered. The blindness isn't permanent. We just have to choose to look. 2 months after the trial ended, I finally found the courage to clear out Charles's office. I'd been avoiding it, that room where he'd spent his final morning, where Clara had watched him die, where everything had ended. But the lawyer handling the estate needed documents. And I needed closure. The office looked exactly as Charles had left it. His reading glasses on the desk. A half-finished crossword puzzle. The photo of us on our wedding day, still in its silver frame. I started with the filing cabinet, sorting through decades of paperwork. Tax returns. Insurance policies. Warranties for appliances we'd long since replaced. And then, in the back of the bottom drawer, I found the letter. It was in Charles's handwriting, shaky, barely legible, written in obvious distress. The paper was dated 2 days before his death. My hands trembled as I read. My dearest Jessica. If you're reading this, then I'm already gone, and my worst fears have come true. I know who Clara is. Not just my daughter, though that truth alone has shaken me to my core, but what she truly wants. She's been blackmailing me for months. Threatening to expose my affair with Marianne. Demanding money. When I refused to give her everything immediately, when I insisted on proper legal channels and gradual transfers, she changed tactics. I believe she's poisoning me. I know how that sounds. Paranoid. Dramatic. But my symptoms don't match any known condition. Dr. Everett is baffled. And Clara, sweet, devoted Clara, is always there with my medications. My supplements. My morning coffee. I've tried to tell Daniel, but she's isolated him so completely. He won't hear a word against her. I've tried to gather evidence, but she's clever. So very clever. I'm writing this as insurance. As a warning. As proof that if something happens to me, it wasn't natural causes. Jessica, my love, you have always had the strongest instincts of anyone I know. Trust them now. If I die suddenly. If the circumstances seem suspicious. Fight. Don't let Clara destroy what we've built. Don't let her win. I'm sorry for the secrets I kept. For Marianne. For the affair that created this nightmare. I should have been honest with you from the start. My silence, my shame, gave Clara the weapon she's now using against us all. But please know this, in 43 years of marriage, I have never loved anyone but you. Marianne was a mistake. A moment of weakness. You are my life. My heart. My everything. If I don't survive this, promise me you'll fight. Promise me you'll find the truth and make her pay. Trust your instincts. Fight. All my love, Charles. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. He'd known. In those final days, as the poison ate away at his heart, as Clara smiled and played the devoted daughter-in-law, Charles had known what was happening to him. And he'd tried to warn me. I fought, I whispered to the empty office. I kept my promise. She's paying for what she did. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the drawer. Some truths needed to be preserved. Remembered. Honored. The estate settlement took 6 months to finalize. Clara's conviction meant she couldn't inherit anything. Every penny she'd stolen was returned, every property she'd tried to claim was restored. But the money felt hollow. Tainted by the blood it had cost. I called Robert Lane and Sheriff Morrison to my house one afternoon in early spring. I want to sell half the estate, I told them. The properties Charles accumulated over the years. The investments. The bonds. Robert frowned. Jessica, you don't have to. I want to. My voice was firm. Charles built his wealth through hard work and careful planning. But Clara's crimes, her obsession with money, showed me something important. Wealth without purpose is just numbers on a page. I want the money to mean something. What did you have in mind? Sheriff Morrison asked. 3 things. I pulled out a list I'd been working on for weeks. First, a donation to the county women's shelter. $200,000 to fund a new wing. For women escaping domestic violence. Women like Marianne might have been, if Charles had known she was pregnant. If she'd had somewhere safe to turn. Robert nodded slowly. Second, a community housing fund. $50,000 to help people experiencing homelessness find stable housing. In Mason's name. Sheriff Morrison's eyes widened. Ma'am, that's... Mason saved my life. And Charles helped save his, years ago. This is how we honor that. How we make sure others get the same chance Mason got. I met his eyes. People shouldn't have to live in tents by the railroad tracks, Sheriff. Not in a town this wealthy. Not when there are empty buildings and resources to spare. That's very generous, he said quietly. And the third thing? Robert asked. I took a breath. I want to establish a scholarship fund at the community college. For young women from difficult backgrounds. Women like Clara might have been, if she'd had better opportunities. Better support. I saw their surprised expressions. She made terrible choices. Unforgivable choices. But maybe if Marianne had had resources, if Clara had grown up with stability, things would have been different. You're being remarkably compassionate, Robert observed, toward the woman who tried to kill you. I'm not being compassionate to Clara. My voice was steel. I'm being compassionate to all the girls who might become Clara if we don't give them better options. Better paths. Robert smiled. Charles would be proud of you. Charles would tell me I'm being financially irresponsible. I smiled back, tears in my eyes. But I think, deep down, he'd understand. Mason came to see me the day the housing fund was announced. He stood on my porch, clean-shaven and wearing new clothes, his eyes bright with something I hadn't seen before, hope. Mrs. Sharpe, I don't know how to thank you. You already thanked me. You saved my life. You saved mine first. His voice cracked. The fund, they found me an apartment. A real apartment with heat and running water and a door that locks. They're even helping me find work. Real work, with a paycheck and benefits. That's wonderful, Mason. Mr. Sharpe used to tell me something, Mason said quietly. When I was at my lowest. When I wanted to give up. He said, the past doesn't define you. The future is still unwritten. He looked at me with tears in his eyes. You're helping me write a new future, Mrs. Sharpe. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that gift. You're already worthy, Mason. You just needed someone to remind you. After he left, I stood on the porch for a long time, watching the sun set over the mountains. Thinking about second chances. About redemption. About how the worst parts of our lives could be transformed into something meaningful. Charles had been right. The past didn't define us. The future was still unwritten. On the 1-year anniversary of Charles's death, I drove to the cemetery alone. His headstone was simple granite, engraved with his name and dates and the words we'd chosen together years ago, beloved husband, father, friend. Forever in our hearts. I sat on the grass beside the grave, the spring sun warm on my shoulders, and pulled out the locket Clara had tried to steal. Inside, the photo of young Charles stared back at me, handsome and hopeful, his whole life ahead of him. The truth you had almost destroyed us, I said aloud. Your affair with Marianne. Clara's existence. The blackmail. The secrets. I touched the headstone, feeling the sun-warmed granite under my fingers. But facing that truth saved me. Saved Daniel. Maybe even saved Clara from herself, in a strange way. She'll spend her life in prison, but at least she can't hurt anyone else. A breeze rustled through the cemetery trees. I've been thinking about what family means, I continued. For so long, I thought it was blood. Biology. The ties we're born with. But Clara taught me something I wish I'd learned a different way. Blood can poison as easily as it can bind. DNA isn't destiny. Love isn't automatic. I opened the locket one last time, studying Charles's young face. Real family, true family, isn't the people we're related to. It's the people who show up when the world falls apart. Who tell us the truth even when it hurts. Who fight for us when we can't fight for ourselves. I thought of Robert, working tirelessly to expose Clara's crimes. Of Sheriff Morrison, risking his reputation to pursue justice. Of Dr. Everett, refusing to accept easy answers. Of Mason, tackling Clara when she came at me with that knife. That's family. Not blood. Not obligation. But choice. Truth. Courage. I stood, brushing grass from my dress, and placed the locket on Charles's headstone. I'm keeping your memory alive, I told him. But I'm also letting go of the secrets. The shame. The fear of what people might think. I smiled through my tears. You spent too much of your life hiding the truth. I won't make the same mistake. As I turned to leave, sunlight caught the locket's silver surface, making it gleam like a beacon. I thought of Clara, locked in a cell somewhere, living with the consequences of her choices. I thought of Daniel, slowly healing, learning to trust again. I thought of Mason, starting over in his new apartment, writing a different future. I thought of all the women who would benefit from the shelter donation. The students who would receive scholarships. The families who would find stable housing. And I thought of Charles, flawed, secretive, but ultimately good, who'd spent his final moments trying to protect me. Family isn't the blood that binds us, I whispered to the wind. It's the truth that survives us. Behind me, the cemetery gates stood open. Ahead, the road stretched toward home. I walked forward into the light.